was corrupting their minds. And in a way it was, in a good way.
I remember reading things and just in my mind going, whoa, whoa. That's why most people who had Mad magazines at my age had to hide them.
Mad is not good. Our readers are not smart. Mad is cheap. The quality is poor. It's stupid. That's our brand.
In comedy, it took people like Mad Magazine to establish that you are allowed to criticize people.
They weren't afraid of anyone. Mad went after everyone.
It inspired a lot of people to want to make comedy.
No! Kelly Clarkson!
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Mad was a textbook for us, how to make fun of things.
Mad was the precursor to The Daily Show and Saturday Night Live.
You see the parody of The Daily Show in this month's Mad magazine?
You're on the cover of Mad magazine. This is a big deal.
That's like a better version of me.
I'll tell you the greatest thing that I've ever achieved in my career. I was on the cover of Mad magazine.
I adore Mad magazine.
When you talk about modern American satire, it starts with Mad. The rest is, as they say, misery.
During the summer of 1947, and what would become a defining moment in the world of satire, President Truman signed into law the National Security Act, creating, among other things, the CIA. Also occurring at the time, a young William Maxwell Gaines would make a decision that would lead to covertly sabotaging our nation for years to come.
Initially, Bill Gaines' career that he ended up in wasn't really what he intended to be. Bill Gaines grew up in Brooklyn. His dad was MC Gaines, and he was on the very ground floor of the comics industry.
He had been in the advertising business, and somewhere along the line, he was packaging 8, 16, maybe 32-page comic books for advertisers. One day, he had the inspiration of putting 10-cent labels on these and sticking them on a newsstand, and they sold out very quickly, coming out with the first comic book, which was called Famous Funnies.
Really, Max Gaines was responsible for jump-starting the comic book industry. He had a sister company to DC Comics. They were kind of separate companies, but tied together in a business way. He was responsible for getting Wonder Woman created, Green Lantern created. They established the Justice Society of America, which way later in the 60s became the Justice League.
Of all the superheroes Gaines championed, one in particular would stand out above the rest.
He recommended to his buddies at DC Comics a character called Superman and published it as a standalone comic. But what he didn't realize is Superman was just going to be ginormous.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's Superman.
Superman. Superman. Superman. Superman.
Ooh, let go, let go, let go.
Max was sitting on a gold mine. The Superman franchise alone would go on to generate billions of dollars. But Max threw it all away by selling his stake to focus on what he believed would be a more lucrative genre.
Educational comics. Picture stories from the Bible, picture stories from world history.
They were boring, and they were literally designed for little kids.
Nobody wanted to read that stuff, and so he was starting to lose his shirt.
So Max Gaines's entertaining and educational comics basically did not move on the newsstands. Nobody bought them. Nobody was interested. The company was about $100,000 in the red.
An already difficult time for the Gaines family would quickly turn to tragedy.
Bill's father was killed in a tragic boating accident in August 1947. Bill's mother insisted that he take over the company, even though Bill actually hated comics. He didn't like anything about the company his dad created. He had a very strained relationship with his father.
To him, I was a bum. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't fix fuses. and I wasn't much good doing anything.
Stepping into the comic business was absolutely the last thing he wanted to do.
Bill's mother said, "Oh, please go down to the business and try and make something out of it." He took a look at all the comics his father was publishing and thought, these are pretty lame.
In the beginning, Bill only went into the office to sign checks and maybe do a little paperwork. But little by little, he started to kind of enjoy being at the company. He liked being around creative people. One of the major changes came in 1948. This guy called Al Feldstein walked into the office.
I showed him what I was doing, which at the time was those Lana Turner sweater types.
Big boobs and short skirts. And Bill's like, I like these comics and I like this guy.
He said, would you do a teenage book for us?
Feldstein originally wanted to be a doctor, but his father lost his business in the Depression. There was no money for medical school. He was about 15 and he found out he could make, $10 a page drawing comic books. So he went where the money was, and he did have talent.
So that's how I started with Bill. We became friends, and he was very naive and new to the business.
Al was a kind of a brash, energetic guy, and Bill needed that. He needed someone to come in and be gung-ho, and Al was all of that. The two of them started working together, making changes, abandoning the kind of kiddie comics that Max Gaines was publishing.
Bill would veer from the educational and focus on the entertaining. The break came when Feldstein proposed they try their hand at a brand new comic book genre.
I said, let's scare the pants off the kids in comic books.
Just as his father had been an innovator, Bill and his editor broke new ground by introducing their take on horror and science fiction comics with a brand new style.
Horror comics became super popular very fast, and the money started coming in. Now EC was finally making a profit, and Bill was able to disprove his dad. He did make EC a success, something his father never could do.
A young illustrator named Harvey Kurtzman arrived at EC's doorstep showcasing his unique talents.
I was known as the funny cartoonist in high school, the guy who used to do cartoons for everybody, make everybody laugh.
In true mad fashion, Kurtzman's first assignment with EC was a comic book that stood out.
They hired Kurtzman to do this comic called Lucky Fights It Through, which was an anti-venereal disease little giveaway pamphlet. Don't sleep with the floozy, you're gonna get VD.
He was very humble and quiet, shy. He was like turtle-like. He looked like a turtle.
Harvey was one of the greatest visual talents ever.
It's amazing who was hugely important at one point and has done so much and influenced so many things. If you wanted to draw the line from Mad, you could draw it right back like a fuse on a bomb. It would reach Kurtzman.
Although Kurtzman did some work in the horror comics, he hated horror comics. He thought they were awful. Harvey pitched that he would do like an adventure comic on his own, which morphed pretty quickly into like a war comic showing the actual real horrors of war. He was a perfectionist, and it took him really a long time to do these war comics. He would go research and talk to veterans, and they were fantastic comics, but they actually never sold all that well. He was putting so much effort in, he wasn't making any money. Feldstein was cranking out horror comics, a story a day, and Kurtzman was, slaving over this stuff.
So I was doing 7 books, and Harvey was doing 2. And he was very much annoyed that I was making 3.5 times as much as he was. And he went to Bill Gaines and he said, I want to make more money. So we had a big brainstorming session about what Harvey would do for the 3rd comic book.
So I suggested that we go to a funny format.
Not a Daffy Duck or a Woody Woodpecker or whatever. Why don't we do an adult humor magazine?
I was originally inspired by a couple of college yearbooks that I came across, and this was a revelation. The college yearbooks had been doing the kind of satire and parody that I wanted to do for years.
Mad #1 hit the newsstands in August 1952. It cost 10 cents an issue. Subscriptions were 75 cents for 6 issues. Readers were met with a greeting. You are now holding our dream child in your hands. We had a swell time creating Mad, and we hope that Mad will have a long, successful life. It featured 4 articles, each essentially a spoof of EC's other comic books. Harvey wrote, penciled, and inked much of Mad himself, but he also selected specific artists from EC's stable of regulars. The brilliant Wally Wood was the best comic book artist of his time. John Severin brought his detail-oriented artistry to the world of satire. The lightning-fast genius of Jack Davis was amazing, and he welcomed the transition from horror to humor.
The horror bit came very easy, and it was kind of humorous. And I made it humorous, and for me, it's just always flowed, so it wasn't really a big shift.
And there was one artist perfectly suited for Mad, the zany Will Elder.
He started putting in what they called chicken fat, like all these little extra gags in the panel, so you could read the main story, and then you could actually go back and pick up all these little things that Elder would stick in the background.
Essentially, we did Mad for ourselves, so it became a very personalized effort. I came upon the Mad format because it was something that I did easily. I've been doing all my life.
Harvey's focus on mostly parodying EC's other titles didn't do much to attract new readers, and Mad struggled to find its audience.
We used to chat, and I would prod him. I would say, you know, there's a lot else out there besides just making fun of what we're publishing. Why don't you make fun of Americana?
With the Great Depression and World War II disappearing in the rearview mirror, Americans could move on to more important things, like fancy ovens, snazzy cars, and an exciting new place to live, the suburbs.
When Mad came on the scene, Elvis Presley hadn't even yet appeared. So you really didn't even have the kind of rock and roll rebellion yet.
However, underneath this picturesque surface, a darker threat loomed.
It was an era of tremendous repression. The Red Thread, the Hollywood blacklist.
Do you have any
The McCarthyism and people were afraid of anything in print.
Minus 10 seconds.
The whole country was in a very conformist mode.
8, 7,
The atom bomb. What could be scarier than that?
5, 4.
The kids were being told to get under their seats when the siren went off, and that they would be okay. And the kids were saying, you know, that's a lot of crap. I'm gonna get turned into dust. So they were starting to question the adult world.
In an atmosphere like this, it was so easy to ridicule things.
With Mad on the brink of bankruptcy, Mad went all in on connecting with the youth of America by ridiculing the perilous status quo.
Mad took a few issues to catch on, did not fly off the newsstand. But then in the 4th issue, they hit on doing a specific superhero.
We lampooned Superman. We ran a feature called Super Duper Man.
That's hilarious.
It was then. You had to be there.
And that was like the turning point in Mad Magazine.
And that was the first classic Mad story that sort of paved the way for all future Mad parodies, which actually DC was very angry about, and they threatened to sue him.
That might have been the first time I realized, oh, there's Superman, and then there's these people who are gonna mock it and make Super Duper Man. You know, it was the beginning of learning that, you know, there are people who are gonna beat the piss out of you in this world, who are gonna mock you and find the thing to make fun of.
Mad just pointed it out for us and gave us permission to laugh at stuff.
People need to laugh to release pressure and anxiety. Laughter is a direct hit.
We're looking at ourselves. We're looking at atrocious things in our culture in a funny way, in a way that makes you laugh. Like a funhouse mirror makes you laugh. It doesn't make you, it shouldn't make you angry.
There's always something to spoof. Anything that's taken seriously is grist for the mill.
They did a parody of Batman and Robin called Batboy and Reuben. And in the splash panel, they put a little notice for the suits at DC, hey, this is a lampoon. We're making fun of this. If you want to sue us, go right ahead.
And now, do you just parody comic strips? No. What else can we parody? We parody advertisements. You could parody movies.
Harvey introduced what would become a defining Mad feature.
The pull, the draw, was the movie satires and the TV satires. Everything else there was great, and it was terrific, and it could be wonderful, but at the end of the day, it was still filler. It was the stuff that fit in between the movie parody and the TV parody.
Mad was saying, yeah, movies are stupid. And that was great. That was a revelation. You could make fun of movies.
They did takeoffs on the Lone Ranger, on Tarzan, and it worked. People thought the stuff was hilarious.
Mad just pointed it out for us. We don't have to take this seriously.
This woman has to be gotten to a hospital.
A hospital? What is it?
It's a big building with patients, but that's not important right now.
They figured out, how can we take a Mad Magazine spoof and make it work from beginning to end as a motion picture?
There's a scene with Leslie Nielsen and Peter Graves.
Captain, how soon can you land?
I can't tell.
You can tell me, I'm a doctor.
That's right out of Mad. I mean, not that those guys wrote it, but could have been something that they would have written.
Mad Magazine did most of the great movies of the 70s and took the piss right out of them, shoved a weed up their ass. Didn't matter what the movie was, they were never respectful.
To take something that was either revered, admired, appreciated, and just beat it to death and then drag it through the street, like, oh my God.
There are R-rated movies I've still never seen that my only point of reference for them is the Mad Magazine parody.
Movie satire is my favorite thing to write because you just see the movie once and then you go from there.
If you made a movie, you would think, oh, what are they going to notice that we did wrong?
But whether it's a great movie, a bad movie, you can do a satire on it because you can pick things out and just make fun of them.
There are some of those parodies that almost exist as the last word on the movie. Famous one for Rosemary's Baby that was actually great. I think there's a secret going on in this. Let's figure it out. It spells out, this movie is boring.
We have Melissa McCarthy, and she says, I bet if Meryl Streep had ferocious diarrhea in a sink, they'd have given her the Oscar. Just because she can crap with an accent.
I was literally thrown out of the movie Love Story before the ending because I couldn't stop laughing when she was dying. It was such a farce. The movie was so stupid, and the audience is crying and I'm laughing, and that's the curse of being a satirist. You laugh at the wrong places.
TV shows were tougher because you had to actually write a story and compose a plot of some sort.
You have to watch at least 5 or 6 episodes to get the character development and stuff like that.
I never thought I would go into humorous illustration. That wasn't my thing. I said, well, give me a script and I'll give it a shot. The biggest challenge in these jobs was the likeness of the characters. If you didn't get the likenesses, the story wouldn't work.
I love you, Bunny.
I love you, honey bunny.
Everybody be cool, this is a robbery!
What are you doing?
I need you to look at something in my butt.
For some reason, Mad did not get invited to a lot of previews.
ABC had a picture file. And they would go down there and help themselves to all the pictures they wanted. Until one day, these people say, hey, they're lampooning our work. Cut them out. No more pictures.
When I met Al Feldstein and Bill Gaines, they were listening to a Yankee-Dodger World Series game. And he said, Bill Gaines said to me after looking at my work, he said, if the Dodgers win, you got the job. When I went to Mad, I didn't do any caricatures of anybody. That wasn't what I did. But a job came up and they needed someone who could do likenesses. And from then on, I was doing movies.
The weird thing for me was I lived down the street from Mort Drucker as a kid. And then one day we worked up the courage courage to knock on the door, and he's the nicest man in the world.
This was comedy that was speaking to all the things that I was aware of. It took pop culture and it took all the TV shows I was watching and turned them on their ear.
I started reading Mad at a very early age, which explains why right now I read on a third grade level.
I had one issue of this one, which looked exactly like a school notebook, so the junior could smuggle it into class and then read the comics. I tell you, it's mad, mad, mad.
A lot of teachers and parents are caught all of a sudden, you know, how do you handle this magazine for your kids?
Most parents didn't approve. They thought it was corrupting their minds, and in a way it was, in a good way.
It was always fun when you'd come across some article or something they'd say where you go, ooh, am I reading something bad here?
It was wonderfully subversive.
I liked the fact that my parents weren't reading it. I remember reading things and just in my mind going, ooh, oh, whoa, if they ever saw that.
I remember a couple of times when I came back from school, my parents had already read the issue and they were kind of like, I don't know if we should be giving you this.
I was not allowed to have a subscription. I had to save some money, and when my mom wasn't looking, I'd, buy a Mad magazine or go off on my own, and I had to stash it.
Satire doesn't respect. That's why most people who had Mad magazines at my age had to hide them.
And anything you had to stash when you were a kid, it must be valuable.
The thing that Mad did, and why kids had to hide Mad, is that no one would think of making fun of what the government was doing. No one would think of making fun of giant corporations.
My readers had no age limitation. You can't write 14-year-old humor and 18-year-olds are going to enjoy it. But you can write 18-year-old humor and a 14-year-old will enjoy it.
Here's where I give Al all the credit in the world. When anybody said, but the kids, they don't even know that. He says, it's okay, it's okay. They'll get it.
There were parts of Mad magazine that went over my head.
But things that go over your head make you want to lift your head up. And that if you want to be the audience that this is, meant for, got to raise your game a little bit.
When you're that age, for some reason, it really speaks to you. I don't know if it's the way that it deals with authority figures, or trying to figure out your place in the world, or dealing with the fact that everybody's lying to you.
There's a point in your life where you don't know people might be lying to you, and then you suddenly discover something that says that to you, and it feels like you're getting the secret knowledge, and I feel like that's what Mad was.
I do think the boys who grew up buying copies of Mad magazine on their own, they're a certain breed. It's like the generation where me and a lot of my peers ultimately come from. The Joe Dantes and the Judd Apatows and the Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams. And I think there's a sense of humor, there's a sensibility, there's a smart aleckness.
As a little kid, you're angry. You're angry that anyone's telling you what to do. You're angry that the teachers want order. So Mad Magazine was always so exciting because it was the one place where you felt like there's other people out there really annoyed like me.
Kurtzman's shrewd silliness really spoke to Mad's young audience. Grew up in a Yiddish-speaking home, but he himself didn't understand it. He would pepper early Mad with some of the more humorous and absurd-sounding words that he heard from his parents.
That's Wiebelfässer.
Wiebelfässer? Wiebelfässer?
Verschluggener.
Jose, do we have a Verschluggener?
Verschluggener.
And that took off. And Mad really took off as a comic book. We'd go down to New Jersey and watch it come off a press, and that was exciting.
As its fan base grew, so did its occasional detractors.
It was an entity unto itself. Kids glommed onto it right away.
They were excited about anything that was going up against this repressive atmosphere that was growing so strong.
Mad's subversive left-wing perspective could be traced to the powerlessness many Jewish Americans felt so soon after the Holocaust. Satire was the outlet to take down those who held all the power.
Humor cuts the bullshit away. But also, the societal value of satire is that it brings everybody down off their high perch.
It's always important to have people hold other people accountable. It really is essential to call it out.
As good as he was, Harvey never liked doing comic books. Comic books were cheaply produced, you know, they were color on the inside, printed on newsprint paper, and Harvey always thought he was slumming in the world of comics, and he longed to be in the world of slick magazines. It's like a proper newsstand magazine.
Kurtzman was really concerned about having his work say something. I mean, he did the greatest war stories ever, and then he created Mad, which is something that's, you know, thumbing its nose at everything.
Fortunately for Mad and fortunately for Harvey, Pageant magazine came to him and offered him the editorship of the humor section of Pageant. And so he came to Bill and he said, look, I never liked doing comics and I always wanted to work for an adult magazine. And Bill said, we want to work for an adult magazine, turn Mad into an adult magazine.
So Bill allowed Kurtzman to transition Mad from a comic book into a magazine to keep Harvey happy and to keep him from going elsewhere.
And that's how the slick version of Mad was born. It was born in issue 24.
You ever hear of Mad Magazine? Used to be a comic magazine. Last spring, though, they decided to become a slick magazine, as they say in the trade, specializing in parody, satire. And they've done a pretty funny job, I think. On the cover of this, it says, can you read that? An extremely important message from the editors. Buy the magazine.
Harvey used Pageant magazine's calling as leverage to make Mad into the slick publication he'd always wanted to do. Mad was an instant success, joining the whole line of wildly popular EC comics, but success puts you in the spotlight.
About the same time, the problem with juvenile delinquency and a lot of anti-comic book stuff was going on. We were suddenly under fire, and the Kefauver Committee was formed.
Horror and crime comics upset kids. You can see the tension develop as the story gets more gruesome. And if it's a bad one, the kid has a mass of jangled nerves by the time he's through it. Men are getting rich off the comic books that teach kids this kind of activity. I don't know how you like it, but it makes me kind of sick.
Every generation has sort of a guy or a movement like that. They're against rock music, they're against, you know, television, they're against video games. There have been anti-comics people ever since comics began.
People who were going after comics as creating delinquency and destroying the youth of America.
Good afternoon from the Federal Courthouse in Foley Square in downtown Manhattan. WNYC is about to bring you the afternoon session of the Senate Subcommittee on Juvenile Delinquency, investigating the effect of comic books on the increased rate of juvenile crime.
On April 21st, 1954, a Senate hearing was convened to discuss the causes of juvenile delinquency, and a star witness was brought in.
This kind of ambitious psychologist named Dr. Frederick Wortham, who published Seduction of the Innocent, and it had to do with how comics were subverting our children and ruining their minds and causing juvenile delinquency.
It is my opinion that comic books are an important contributing factor in many cases of juvenile delinquency. As long as the crime comic book industry exists in its present form, there are no secure homes. I hate to say that, Senator, but I think Hitler was a beginner compared to the comic book industry.
They decided that Bill should insist upon being heard at this investigation.
And he very unwisely decided, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to volunteer to talk, and I'm going to go in there and defend my comic books on First Amendment grounds. The kids have rights too, they have a right to read this stuff.
My name is William Gaines. I was the first publisher in these United States to publish horror comics. I'm responsible. I started them.
And you think that does the children lots of good to read those things, do you?
I don't think it does them a bit of good, sir, but I don't think it does them a bit of harm either.
Because he voluntarily appeared, he now painted a big target on his back, like he's the horror comics bad guy, and they just skewered him.
Man with a bloody axe holding a woman's head that's been severed from her body. You think that's some good taste?